Coming up at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, Friday, May 25th, Saturday, May 26th, 2018 is African Liberation Day. African Liberation Day. This year's theme is honoring our warriors and our trailblazers. The keynote speaker is going to be Dr. Ray Winbush, who's a research professor and director of the Institute for Urban Research at Morgan State University. We want to welcome this brother to the African History Network show right now. Hotep, brother, how you doing today?
Hey, Hotep, brother Michael, what's going on?
Oh, I'm all right, man. I'm all right. Good to talk to you, man. I follow you on Twitter also. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you. Good to be talked to.
Absolutely. Well, look, man, it's that time of the year again. African Liberation Day is coming up. We know yesterday was the 93rd birthday of Malcolm X. And
Right.
let people know, what is your participation going to be this year in African Liberation Day? Why is African Liberation Day so important?
Well, it's important because, as you were telling one of your callers, we have to connect in the, I don't like to use the word diaspora, but we have to, connect in the Ma'afa with our ancestors. It's amazing. I will hear African people say things like, I'm going to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. They have no Irish in it. I'm going to celebrate 4th of July like we somehow were liberated in 1776.
Right.
But then you tell them, well, why don't you wear some kente cloth, let's say, for Kwanzaa? Oh, man, that's that black stuff. I'm not in that. So we got to connect to our roots. It's essential for cultural survival. And if we don't do it, we're going to be lost. And I think that's one of the great importances of African Liberation Day.
Absolutely. Well, I always say, man, I've studied, well, number one, I've studied the history of basically all the holidays, major holidays, these European holidays. Yeah. And I always say, if you wear green on St. Patrick's Day, will you wear red, black, and green on African Liberation Day? If not, why not?
That's right.
If you wear green on St. Patrick's Day, will you wear red, black, and green on African Liberation Day? And if you understand the history of St. Patrick's Day, and you understand that Patrick was a British slave sent into Ireland in 432 A.D. by Pope Celestine I to convert the Irish population to Christianity, and he was fighting against the Druids, who were practicing a watered-down version of teachings coming out of ancient Kemet. If you actually understand it, you understand that St. Patrick's Day is nothing to celebrate in the first place, even if you have Irish ancestry. There ain't nothing to celebrate.
Exactly. It's murder. But we love celebration. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with us having our hot sauce on 4th of July, but if that's all you're about to, well, I'm going to, look at the fireworks, talk about it. We need to go in depth about what some of these holidays mean and how oftentimes we're simply honoring those of murderers, especially murderers of our past. I looked at part of that spectacle on Saturday. And
the royal wedding yesterday, because I just talked about that, the royal wedding.
Yeah,
yes.
And people I don't know if people know this or not, but on the crown or that tiara that she had on, there were 53 different colors of flowers from 53 nations that the British had colonized. So they were putting her stamp about their oppression, their global oppression on African people and other people on her as she walked down that aisle.
Right.
We got to always look for the African president, like Runoko Rashidi said, in everything that we do, and that's a major reason for African Liberation Day.
Absolutely. Well, about 100 years ago, 1/5 of the world's population was under British rule. See,
that's right.
People don't understand the oppression, and it's not just the slave trade. It's conquering India. It's the colonization of African nations like Kenya,
right.
Nigeria, Ghana, things like this, and then the Caribbean nations as well. Okay, so
exactly.
May 25th is African Liberation Day, and on this day, many African countries celebrate the hard-fought achievement of their freedom from European colonial powers. Speaking of European colonial powers, right? And around the world, people celebrate African Liberation Day, and they honor their ancestors for the struggle fought to throw off the shackles of European colonialism. All right.
That's right.
Now, what are you going to talk? Now, you're presenting on, I know you're doing a workshop on Saturday, right?
Right.
Okay.
On reparations, reparations.
Okay, so go ahead and talk for a few minutes because we got a few minutes before the break. Go ahead and talk and tell us what are you going to talk about and why is reparations so important?
Well, reparations, of all what you just discussed about the countries, and if you add to that British colonization, this white Dutch historian says by 1904, Europeans had controlled 84% of the world's surface. I mean, they controlled everything, the French, the German, everybody.
Right.
And so reparations, the idea of reparations when a crime against humanity has been committed, and that nation acknowledges it by paying reparations for the victims of those crimes. And so in this country, we see how reparations came forth relative to many indigenous peoples groups. We see in 1988 that real radical president, Ronald Reagan, gave reparations to the Japanese for their incarceration during World War II. So everybody has received reparations except African people. And so I'm going to be going into depth about what is reparations, because many of us misunderstand it,
right.
What we can do to support the movement and so forth.
Okay, now, go ahead.
Yeah. No, and Friday night I'm going to be talking a lot about pragmatic things that African people can do to put Africa in them, which is already there. We just got to awaken up. So I'm going to talk about some very practical things that can be done to be an African in this planet.
Okay. Now, Friday night, the event is 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Friday night. Saturday, I think it's probably Saturday. I think is 12 minutes.
I don't know the exact
time. We'll have it on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Saturday, I know they usually have the parade around 11 a.m., something like that. It's going on to probably about 6. You do your workshop at 2:30 p.m. on Saturday. Okay, this is taking place at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, 315 East Warren Avenue. Free event both days. Come on out, bring the family. There'll be edutainment. There'll be speakers. You're going to learn a lot. Also, it's not a crime to be African. If you wear green on St. Patrick's Day, will you wear red, black, and green on African Liberation Day? Now, when you talk about reparations, a couple of things. Well, first of all, is understand I have a number of teachers. I've been studying 26 years, and you familiar with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book "The First Americans Were Africans: Documented Evidence"?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's my man right there. I've interviewed him about 11 or 12 times. Yeah. So even though African people, even though we were here going back at least 51,700 years, that does not mean the transatlantic slave trade did not happen. You have to understand the chronology of history. The transatlantic slave trade happened as well. Now,
that's right, no doubt about it.
Now, I think when we talk about reparations, I think a critical portion of time to look at is from January 1st, 1808, up until the Civil War, up until basically like 1860, especially because we know the Clotilda was the last slave ship to come in, and the U.S. was violating their own laws because they outlawed the importation of African people January 1st, 1808.
Exactly.
Talk about
and
that.
What you find is between 1808, because of the outlawing, even though they were lying about, they were still importing Africans during that time.
Yes.
But you see a massive increase in the rate of black women between 1808 and the Civil War, because those so-called white enslavers they couldn't get their children, if you please, and the wombs of black women became commodified.
Right.
And so you start seeing a massive increase in that.
And the slave breeding also, the slave breeding process.
It increased dramatically after 1808.
Yes.
It's good that you probably know that Zora Neale Hurston, they found his lost manuscript, and there's a book out right now called Barracoon about the last person who was on the Clotel. So
Cudjoe Lewis.
Cudjoe
Lewis is his name. Yes.
All of this stuff is very important. All of it's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, a people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past, in the present, and the future to meet the needs of the community. Let people know how they can get in contact with you, how they can, do you have books, you have DVDs, how can people get in contact with you and get more information from you?
Well, social media, you can just look up Ray Winbush on Facebook. You can look up R. Winbush on Twitter. I got a bunch of followers, but you can look at that. And then I take my email, which is Raymond.Winbush@Morgan.edu here in Baltimore.
Okay.
I'm going to be talking about some of the stuff that's occurring in Baltimore as well, relative to, the Freddie Gray murder as well, and all of this stuff.
Right.
So I'm easy to find. Just Google me and you can find me.
Okay, absolutely. All right, brother. Well, I'm the AHN show on Twitter, man. So I sent you a couple messages. So follow me back on Twitter.
Great.
The AHN show.
I will do that.
And I look forward to seeing you Friday. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
absolutely. All right, brother.
Okay, take care. I look forward to seeing you Friday. Hotep, brother. Have a good night. Okay. All right, so that's Dr. Ray Winbush. Come to the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History on Friday, May 25th, Saturday, May 26th, African Liberation Day. And we'll get this information up at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It's also at theright.org, WRIGHT, theright.org, on which is their website. Okay, we'll be back in a few minutes. The African History Network show, 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the future of radio.